Welcome once again, friends. Thank you for joining me. Right now, this season is still causing so many of us stress, whether that's emotional anxiety, you're stuck at home with your spouse or your kids, maybe you've lost your job, the finances have been all messed up. I want you to know that you are on my heart and I pray for you daily. I would love to hear from you, whatever is going on in your life, especially during this season when things are so disrupted. Certainly the financial picture for so many have been disrupted. The millions of people who have lost their jobs, the businesses who have gone out of business. And I believe that for many, this season has become a wake-up call. And I've heard from some who are experiencing exactly that. That, they knew they should have been doing things differently with money, but, it's hard, or I'll do it later. And this season has forced some things to come into clarity that maybe hadn't seemed as important before. And that may be around your finances. Crown Financial Ministries has been helping Christians deal with money God's way for several decades. My guest this evening is Megan Buerkle, a content manager, the director of content at Crown Financial Ministries. Her personal story is really encouraging and uplifting, but even more, the kinds of practical things that you and I need to understand, especially in this uncertain season. Uncertainty disrupts us all, and certainly the economy, and for many, our individual economic circumstances are very uncertain right now. How do you think about that? How do you deal with the anxiety around money? How do you make appropriate decisions? Fear is never a good reason to make a decision, but there is so much of that going on right now. You hear the negative news, and we've talked before about practical ways to deal with anxiety itself, but specifically in the financial area. I am really looking forward to talking with Megan Buerkle about that very thing from a biblical perspective. Hearing what God has to say on both a practical and a soul level. So if this is an area that is causing you some angst or stress in this season in particular, I know this will be practical and very encouraging. So here's my conversation with Megan Buerkle at Crown Financial Ministries. Well, Megan Buerkle, it is such a pleasure to have you with us on the program today from Crown Financial Ministries. Thank you for taking this time and sharing your heart and mission in the ministry of Crown. Glad you're with us.
I'm so glad to be here, Carol. Thank you for your invitation.
This season has brought financial truths and challenges to the fore for people who even may not have been thinking about this as much recently. We have come through a season where, at least in North America and in much of the world, close to full employment, a lot of things have looked quite good in the economy as a whole, and then just so quickly, within just a matter of weeks, things have been so disrupted. Millions of people out of work or furloughed or lost their jobs, businesses closing and whatever. And I'd just like to maybe start, Megan, with asking you just what might you be hearing, if anything, about what the people Crown is ministering to. What are their challenges? What are the things that they are stressing about?
Yes, well, I think you hit the head on the nail. The first thing is that unemployment rate is skyrocketing. Several family members of the staff members at Crown have been furloughed or laid off. Mm-hmm. Even one of my family members has been, not only were his hours cut, but his salary was cut as well. And so that's a really big pain point right now, especially if you weren't prepared for that. Then on top of that are the emotional issues of that. Is your identity wrapped up in that vocation? What are the emotional issues that are coming to fruition with now being at home and not going out? So just all different kinds of things that we're dealing with and trying to help people with right now.
One of the things I believe this season highlights again is that money is about a whole lot more than money. It really isn't about the number of dollars in your checkbook, that it has so much to do. You mentioned identity, you mentioned our sense of security, even our relationship with God. And as much as this has impacted our culture, this is a global phenomenon, and Crown ministers around the world. And I know it may take time for information to flow and whatever, but are you hearing anything in other areas where Crown ministers about how believers in other parts of the world are being impacted?
Yes, so that's one of the most amazing things about Crown is just the global impact that we have. We exist in over 100 countries, and so ever since this started, we've been very quickly in contact with those leaders. Our Latin American leaders, it's so neat. They're getting together weekly with our headquarters staff to do prayer, just to talk about what's going on. One of our leaders is actually stuck in Venezuela. He's a missionary in Chile, and he's stuck in Venezuela. The story that actually stands out to me the most, that really just hit me in contrast and what we're dealing with here in America versus what it's like to be in another country, is our leader in Zimbabwe talked about how the police who are supposed to be keeping you safe, they're the ones in Zimbabwe that are actually beating people when they're just trying to go to the grocery store to get food.
Oh, wow.
And so we've been in really deep prayer for the Zimbabwean people, but specifically for our leaders as well, to make sure that they're just able to get the sustenance so they can survive week to week. So it really is pretty intense when you think about the impact worldwide.
Yeah. I have seen some things on social media of Christians being prevented from, buying food until those who are non-Christians in certain countries, buy it, and discrimination there. And just our hearts go out to those people, and our prayers go out to them. In our country, where most of our viewers and listeners to this program are going to be here in this culture, we're hearing some potentially, scary things. The unemployment rate, of course, being a big one. But how long is this going to go on? We don't know. So much uncertainty. And from a Christian perspective, a biblical perspective, what can you say about how we should even think about this whole area? Because it can feel scary. How do we think about it?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind, and even when we were talking, that previous question, the first thing that hit me when this pandemic hit is what's been going on in my church. My pastor for almost a year now we've got a life verse that is 2 Chronicles 17, I believe, that if my people will hear my voice, will humble themselves and repent and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. And the thing that hits me with that is, he's not talking to non-believers. He says, if my
That's
people,
right.
the people who love me, the people who know me, the people who say they serve me. So you talk about, the Christians being held up from being able to get their groceries or things, that's the rest of us believers that really do need to be praying for all people, but for those believers as well. To answer, should people be doing? I would again lead with faith. It's in our weakness. When we're scared, we feel weak, we feel vulnerable, but we know as Christians and can trust that it's in our weakness that He is made strong. So the first thing I would say is to place your hope in Him, in God, who will provide. Think about times in your past where God has provided for you, maybe even superly, just so that even though it might be hard to believe right now, when you're losing your job, or when you're just not sure where that next paycheck's going to come from, or any of that, think about times where God has provided you in the past so that you can really believe and trust in that. I know that can seem naive. I battle that. There's one of my favorite verses in the Bible is, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That part of me that, because I even get scared. I've got a 10 son who, I worry about him getting sick. And so I vacillate between the trust and the untrust in God and in His provision. and his protection. But practically, when you hear those scary things, I think we need to reflect that and be prudent in our finances. One of the first things that we're teaching right now at Crown is to cut your expenses by 25%. And we're saying that no matter what your job is right now. So if you've lost your job or if you've been furloughed, you really do need to be cutting those expenses. Some of that is happening naturally because we've been staying home locked in. So there's less on gas and less on eating out. But that is something that I would say would be one of the first things that I would recommend is if you're scared, there's a plan, and we've got resources for you at crown.org as well. The crisis budget is a really good one to lean on. And you can find that at crown.org/coronavirus.
Great. You mentioned we're not eating out, and yet some people, when they're stressed, they will go to something, like, the delivery, the food people that, you want to support your local economy and it's easy and you're stressed. So I'll just order delivery, and it can be easy to fall into a trap of, oh, I need this to kind of help my anxious state right now, and I'll worry about that tomorrow. That it can feel overwhelming to make those kinds of changes because it takes energy, and when we're already stressed, to find the energy to make some of those wiser financial choices. Talk a little bit, if you would, Megan, that again, that this is more than only the dollars. There's a mindset behind it, and having to be that, to be disciplined and take those steps, even in the middle of being anxious.
Right. I'm smiling because I'm thinking about a conversation my husband and I even had. He went to the grocery store a few days ago and he asked, do we get those kettle chips that we love so much? Because that is the comfort food. We love those salt and pepper kettle chips, but they're like $4 a bag. And so we're trying to take prudent steps now in order to help. Hopefully it'll pay off in the future. We know it will either way. No matter how long this pandemic goes on, it doesn't hurt for us to be making those decisions. And I really think, to your point, Carol, it's a heart transformation. Are you seeking your comfort in the kettle chips, or are you seeking your comfort in something that is unchanging, in our God? And, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but, if you said you looked at my background, that isn't always how I've been, in the past.
Yes.
Sure. I want those kettle chips. I want, name anything for that. But I have seen, when I take those steps to learn about what God has to say about money, when I am prudent and follow his principles, there is a joy and a freedom that comes from that. So yes, it is a deeper heart issue. And at Crown, we try not to just treat the symptom of finding comfort in those purchases and in those transactions, but really reflect within the heart. Chuck Bentley, and I believe Larry Buerkle, our founder, always said that every outward transaction is a reflection of an inward heart condition. And so anytime that you're spending money right now, what is that reflecting? Is that reflecting fear, or is that reflecting faith?
Yeah, good. And the dollars you spend, if you spend out of fear or make a financial decision out of fear, may be different than out of faith. And I love that you put that perspective on it, that where those decisions are coming from is really what's most important. Not to put our trust in things that can be taken away, and money can come and go. Yes, we need to be smart with it, but not to put our faith in something that can be taken away, to put it in God, and that being the only unshakable thing. For people who have had a very serious income disruption now, whether they've been, furloughed or lost their job or whatever, maybe they came into this already in debt, and their financial situation may not have been all that healthy, and maybe they hadn't really been paying that much attention. And this is now a wake-up call. You mentioned cutting expenses, but can you just take a minute or two and talk about some of those ways that they should be, what should they be doing at this point?
Yeah, so we talked about cutting those expenses, looking at the crisis budget and developing that. I would also say, and this is a hard one because if you're in this situation, you might not have been doing this anyway, but saving, even if it's $1, $5 a week, just the disciplined practice of that will help in the future. And again, that's a really hard thing because you're thinking, I need to pay these bills. I need to, put food on the table. But again, even if it's a small amount, that discipline is really what we're looking for. The next thing I would say, if you are in debt, this is time. This is the time to really focus on that. Your creditors, they want you to pay off your debts too. That's why they're calling you. That's why they're sending you messages. And so give them back a call and say, hey, I'm really hurting here. And they will work with you. If you are not comfortable with that, or if you're having a harder time, we have partners, our Christian credit counselors can be found at christiancreditcounselors.org. They are more than willing and ready to step in and advocate for you to help consolidate that debt. They'll look at your plan and make a difference. I mean, the point right now is that you've found yourself with a little bit more time on your hand, and this can be an opportunity. My pastor just preached about this the other day, that there are over 50,000 characters in the Chinese language, and the same character for crisis is the same character for opportunity. And so really shift that mindset to say, okay, I've lost my job. This is really scary. I'm not prepared. I don't have those savings. What can I do? This is a good time to invest and learn God's principles about money, and to see what can you be doing now to help take the steps in the future so that you're in a better position now and in the future. So summary, cut your expenses, save, work on getting out of debt.
Yeah. I have imagined also that there are certain opportunities. I love the way you said crisis and opportunity being the same character in the Chinese language, but to see this as an opportunity for some creativity on the income side of things too. Imagine if you were a toilet paper manufacturer over the last couple of months, or Amazon is hiring tens of thousands of people, a couple 100,000 people, I understand. Now, what you have been doing in the past may not be exactly like what the opportunities are out there, but there is a way to look at this as an opportunity, potentially, even on the income side, creatively.
Absolutely. The story of the widow and the oil, Elijah asked her, what do you have? And so look around you. What do you have? Are there things that you can be selling on Facebook Marketplace right now? Are there skills that you have that you can be utilizing to increase your family income? And then, yes, absolutely, those job opportunities. Grocery stores are highly in need of people right now. Amazon is hiring all over the nation. You don't have to live in a certain part of the world in order to be hired. And no, that might not be what you feel like your God-given design is, but you never know. If you put yourself out there for one of those places that are hiring, and your pride may take a hit because you've lost your job. But now is not the time to be prideful, to take one of those opportunities and see where God may lead you, especially even during furlough, to take that. And if you're faithful to it, I truly believe that God will be faithful to you as well.
Yeah. One of the big principles that the Bible talks about, both in the Old and New Testament, Jesus talked about this, and Paul and all, was that of giving. When some people hear, God and money, or Christians and money in the same sentence or paragraph, it can have a feeling of, oh, that's just another preacher trying to get my money. But talk about what you have learned about that, and the Crown's perspective and so on, that this isn't about God trying to get your money. Frankly, he doesn't need it. You need to be generous, and how God's principles there make a difference for us.
Yeah. Again, that's a good question. And it's a deep question, theologically. there are over 2,300 verses in the Bible on money and possession. So God clearly has a lot to say about it. And that mentality of God just wants my money was one that I absolutely used to live by. And then I learned through Crown what it meant to be a steward. And, of those 2,300 verses, I think one of my favorites, and really kind of puts things in a more positive light, is in Haggai, which is a book that you wouldn't typically frequent. But Haggai 2:8 says, "The silver is mine and the gold is mine," where God is laying claim that our money belongs to Him. And the coolest thing about that, Carol, is that means if you've lost your job, if you've lost that money, you haven't really lost anything because it wasn't yours. It was all,
That's right.
yeah, all His. We have some cool testimonies of people whose hearts have completely changed when they realize that. And so just learning how to steward that and say, okay, well, I have less than I have now, but that doesn't mean I don't have anything. So what can I have? What can I, how can I give back to the Lord? How can I give to people right now? The church in Macedonia, Paul talks about in their poverty, they gave, and they gave exceedingly. And then not only that, but they begged other people to join in. They begged other people to join in into the sainthood and to give generously. So one of the things we're teaching right now, after those 3 steps that I'd said before of cutting your expenses, saving, getting out of debt, is to give and to find a way to give generously and to give sacrificially, especially to those who have not lost their job, especially to those who are still gaining an income. Find a way to help others right now, because that's just spreading Jesus all around.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I know from the doctor part of me, there's very little that raises a person's emotional mood and elevates your spirits more than helping somebody else. That's that giving. Yes, it includes money. It includes other things too. It's what you are. Of course, the biblical principle: where your heart is, there where your treasure is, there will your heart be. That's much more than giving to your church, which you absolutely must do. But it's that spirit of, it's not all about me. That whatever I have isn't only for my benefit. That I'm here for a reason, and that giving of who you are helps you see what that purpose can be.
Right, absolutely. So if you're a teacher, teach. If you're a friend to someone, so go be a friend. Just whatever it is that you have, finding a way to give of that time and that talent that you have as well. In addition, again, it's that posture of stewardship.
Yeah. I think our viewers, if you're open to it, Megan, might love to just hear the short version of your story. It wasn't like you grew up not knowing anything about money, and yet you didn't always live by that. And you had to learn to put these things into practice yourself.
Yes, absolutely. So I laugh because I think, I did grow up knowing about money. My mom, for 28 years of my life, ever since I was 6 months old, worked for a credit counseling company. And she literally cut up credit cards for a living. They were my puzzles. She would come home with Ozarka bottles full of cut up credit cards, which was every single one of those signified someone dedicated to getting out of debt and to spending money wisely. She would take my brother and I to Dollars and Cents, SENSE seminars, so that we would learn. And you would think that would have set in, but in college, I decided to get a credit card. And not secretly, my mom knew about that. And for a while, I was utilizing it and paying it off every month whenever I would put it on. But then I decided to go on a weekend trip with my friends and put our hotel rooms on my credit card, thinking that everybody would pay me back. And everybody except one person paid back on time, paid me back so I could make that payment on time. However, without that extra person's funds and a 23% interest rate, my credit card maxed out very quickly. And so here I was stuck in debt, had no real way. I was working part-time jobs in college, had no real way, or felt like I had no real way to pay. Meanwhile, I'm off going and the taco shop in Texas.
Yeah.
And so just, really apathetic. I was like, well, I've got this credit card debt. Everybody has credit card debt. I'll just pay it off at some point. And I eventually got it to where it was shut off and worked out a payment plan with the credit card company. On top of that, I had student loans, and got out of college and found a way to start paying for those with my income, but was just paying just barely more than the minimum payment. That was where my mom's seminars had come in to say, don't just pay the minimum payment. You need to pay a little bit more so that you can pay that principal off, not just the interest. And so was doing that, and then got married to the most wonderful man who was debt free. And I had to tell him, love of my life, you are entering debt again.
Yeah.
And not only that debt, but it was calculated to take 5 to 6 years to pay off. And that was just really hard for him, really hard for me to admit that I hadn't been managing my money well enough, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And again, I was apathetic toward, well, everybody has this. This is just what we do. While we were having that conversation, my car gave out. And so then I had to get a car, and that came with a car payment. And even though we had a good down payment ready and prepared in savings, that just added to that debt. And here I am working for Crown Financial Ministries for about 5-6 months now, and knowing that we help people get out of debt. And I just thought, okay, well, maybe it's time that I learn how to manage my money. What does God have to say? Maybe I should buy into the company's message a little bit. And so I took Crown's online money life personal finance study. I actually have my book right here, but
that's great.
And was really transformed. It was that verse that I told you, the silver is mine and the money is mine. And I just realized that I wasn't being a good steward of the money had given me to resource, that if I were, morbidly to die, that he probably wouldn't tell me well done, that I had buried my talent, my silver in the ground, and wasn't doing anything with it. And so that is really where my heart transformed, and I started living more toward eternal riches instead of the temporal riches of here on this earth. Even though we have really good savings, I had to decide, no, we need to be prudent. We don't know how long this economy is going to be affected. And so it's time to make those decisions now that can be helpful and bring financial peace, which transcends the rest of our life as well, right? That's what couples fight about more than anything is finances. And so if we can be prudent with those finances, it really just lifts every other part of our life.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that story, Megan. That I hope is so encouraging, no matter where our viewers are in their financial journey. And let me ask if maybe you can just take a moment and speak to that person who feels totally overwhelmed with all this, whether they've lost their job or not, but just the whole financial environment today has let this overwhelm and anxiety just reach a boiling point in them. And maybe they intellectually know the scriptures that says, my God will supply your need and all of that, but they're just really feeling anxious and overwhelmed by all this right now. You just maybe speak to them for a moment with some encouragement.
Yes, absolutely. First, I would say, take heart, dear friend. God is a strong tower. If you're feeling like you need to do something, that's how I feel when I feel like I've lost control. I don't know what I'm doing. I need to make a plan. One of my favorite techniques, I used to advise college students, and they would come to me with challenges. And so I use this for myself when I talk with them and say, okay, you are sitting in the midst of a challenge, in the midst of a storm. And the first thing we can know is that a storm doesn't last forever, right? The rain will always eventually stop. So just know that and take heart. And then the technique that I really like to use is to say, okay, pretend you're in a job interview. And for those of you listening right now, a lot of you will be in a job interview, hopefully here in the near future. And typically you're always going to be asked about, name a challenge you've had to deal with and how you overcame it. And so you're sitting in the midst of this challenge, and you have the opportunity to think about, how do you want to answer that question in the job interview? you want to be able to say that you overcame it by doing XYZ, or this was you then, this is you now. Just like I said before with my story, that this was me before not handling my money
Yeah.
well, and now, I've had this heart transformation. But I had to put steps in place in order to make that happen. So do that. Seek out those resources. Many of them exist at crown.org. Dr. Carol Ministries has tons of resources, really great podcasts, especially on unity within your marriage as well. So take advantage of those right now and listen to that advice. Find ways to implement it right now. And then I would just say, be daily in the Word.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot at the moment. But I still need that encouragement. And the Lord just never, his word never returns void. So think about how you want to answer that job interview question. And then what are the steps that you need in order to implement them? And I think that'll give you a plan that at least helps me feel like I've got a little bit more control, and pray over that.
Amen. Thanks, Megan, so much for just your transparency and encouragement in some of these very, very practical ways. Last question. What is there a scripture that you would just like to leave? One of those 20-some hundred that the Bible has to say about money, just one to leave us with?
I think it would have to come from the parable of the talents, that last one, that well done, my good and faithful servant.
Mm-hmm.
You have been faithful with little. And so many of us right now, those 30 million of you that are claiming unemployment and feeling like you have so little, he's speaking to you that you have been faithful with little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master.
Mm-hmm.
And so let that be your goal, that even though you feel like you have so little, how can you be faithful to it right now?
Awesome. Well, God bless you and all that you and those working with you are doing through Crown for God's kingdom and so many. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carol. Appreciate the opportunity.
You almost certainly got some practical takeaways from that conversation. I know I did some things that even I had not thought about specifically in wise decisions to make during this particular season. I would love you to check out crown.org. So many resources there. I know Megan mentioned them. They have a long track record of solid biblical-based help. So feel free to check them out if that is your particular challenge. Also, I want to remind you that money is about more than money. And it really touches so deep at our emotional level about our relationships with others in the family, in your community, and your relationship with God. One of those ways in which all the areas in which God made us are intersected. That integrative way in which God made us. There's probably no measuring stick clearer about that than money. I want you to know that I'm praying for you. I love to hear from you. If this or any time, if there are specific questions or challenges that are something that you'd like some confidential input on, feel free to write to me. I respond to any of those personally. Know that the message is confidential, and I would love to hear from you. I also would encourage you to come to our community forums. Just go to the member portal on our online home, fullyalivegroup.com. Click on the community tab. Would love you to comment on one of the topics that's already posted there, or to post one of your own. I show up there regularly, and I would love you to come and be a part. Thank you again for your presence, for your engagement. I want you to know that I pray for you regularly. And until next time, may God bless you.